Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the fume lush ice of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka I want to see a movement out there, the intersectional dialectic of moshing. I told you I had a good one.
That's pretty good. There's be some very, very abstract wall of death going on. In the end, all of the big guys have to sort of like lie down while the small guys kind of like stomp them.
It's called speaking truth to power.
Yeah, it's So I guess I am the black metal guy, aka best friends. This lobster with anxiety has an emotional support alligator.
Well, it couldn't be an alligator. It would have to be a crocodile.
Oh, why?
Because alligators are freshwater only.
Good point.
You see, you get to learn about biology on Terminus.
That's true. There's no such thing as like a freshwater lobster that lives in brackish estuaries.
Freshwater lobsters. I don't know. Are there freshwater lobsters?
I don't know. There's like weird freshwater clams and stuff, you know?
There's like crayfish, which I guess you can kind of like grandfather into the lobster category in some sense. I mean, they're freshwater. But I immediately caught on as a lifetime Floridian. You know, alligator biology is near and dear to my heart. So I'm always there to help people out with cool gator facts. You know,
dude, there's a picture of pink coral freshwater lobster. This thing is badass.
Ooh, pink coral freshwater lobster.
Yeah. This guy has been souped up. Maybe it's like specially bred or something.
I mean, he's a fancy boy. I really like his color.
Arizona Aquatic offers a variety of unique lobsters, including the pink coral freshwater lobster, native to New Guinea, easy to care for and feed. In fact, they scavenge for leftover food and waste. Detritus. Well,
I was hoping that was in the description. Detritus. Females will carry babies for more than 6 months under her tail. That's pretty dedicated.
That's a good mother. Yeah. Okay, so it's our pink coral freshwater lobster with anxiety who has an emotional support alligator. There,
I like it.
Sense.
Okay, yeah, I can go with that. We'll let that one play out. It'll be great until the alligator just gets tired of it, as they are wont to do sometimes. You know?
This episode is brought to you by Arizona Aquatic Gardens.
It's brought to you by everyone's youthful dreams of becoming a marine biologist. Why is it on like 90s or 2000s shows, marine biologist was always like a shorthand for like big aspirations? Like as a kid, that's kind of fallen away.
There was a brief moment when that was my big aspiration, you know, like around 4 or 5.
You wanted to become the American Jacques Cousteau?
I really admired, the diver at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist, but I just watched a lot of Indiana Jones, so I think that kind of caused that.
Yeah, it's things have fads, right? The 90s was like early environmentalism, and so it was like stuff that was an easy sell to the masses, right? So like the Rainforest Cafe.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or so we like the Rainforest, Amazon.com, the Rainforest Cafe. And then you also have like Shamu, right?
Yeah.
We all like whales. So I think it was probably a product of that. It's like,
I mean, you see, that's one of those like mass cultural trends that I can kind of get behind. I believe
of course,
some standard environmental impulse is something that should be fostered.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Especially if you can create cool, fancy-looking freshwater lobster. And speaking of supporting the most important environments across the Earth, You can support Terminus, the only environment that matters in our co-prosperity sphere. So one of the easiest and freest ways to do that is by subscribing to us on social media. You can follow me, the Death Metal Guy, on Facebook at Terminus Podcast, or my compatriot, the Black Metal Guy, on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. Additionally, if you are listening to this in another tab on YouTube, why don't you mosey back on over from the hardcore pornography you're watching in another tab, or on your second monitor if you're especially elite, and hit that like and subscribe button, and be sure to hit the bell so the notifications go right to your inbox. Also, feel free to leave us a review on whatever podcasting platform of your choice you may happen to be listening on. And finally,
you could also leave us a YouTube comment describing the hardcore porn you're watching.
Yeah, I would highly encourage that.
Yeah. In links, you could always just add a link.
Describe it in excruciating detail. If you can do some of that AI upscaling to improve the frame rate and the resolution, that would be really cool too. I know some guys on some forums I go that are doing that with like classic 90s pornography, and the effects are uncanny, let me tell you. And then for the truly elite, those are the most pornographic among us, you can support us on our equivalent of OnlyFans, which is Patreon. $3 and up gets you access to the Terminus Prime and Terminus After Dark bonus episodes, where we cover older records that we consider hidden gems, as well as listener submissions from upper-level patron tiers. And $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server, where we discuss things like freshwater lobsters and the status of everyone's various Warhammer miniature painting ventures. With that being said, Black Metal Guy, you do have a little thing for us to open the episode. Is it time for heated opinions on Chilean war metal?
Dum dum dum. Yeah, that's true. Wow, things have really come full circle. Well, we got an email several months ago, and by several I mean possibly 5 months ago, from a literal Chilean war metal band called Onslaught Kommand. That's command with a K, don't get it twisted. And this is their self-titled debut on Godz with a Z of War Productions, one of the labels that we find ourselves constantly shilling. That and like Inferno Profundus are that's some real shit.
Yeah, Gods of War and Inferno Profundus have been putting out just awesome stuff over the past couple of years.
So somehow kindred spirits. Anyway, Onslaught Kommand is it is like they have a very distinctive take on the war metal idea, and it is extremely refreshing and very much up both of our alleys. Mm-hmm. This sounds very different from the last thing we'll be reviewing tonight, but both of them could be described as bulldozer music. Mm-hmm. And I like that.
You certainly do.
Yes. So Death Metal Guy, how would you describe the uniqueness of this?
Well, Onslaught Kommand is, to put it in the simplest terms, it is war metal of a style that we used to see more of, but has kind of fallen away, which is war metal that is pretty much built exclusively out of, like, death metal and grindcore parts. I remember one time I was hanging out with an old bandmate. I was in, like, sort of a Black Death band with him, and he wasn't much of a black metal guy. And I was like, well, but he was a big grindcore guy. I said, well, have you ever listened to, like, Revenge or something? And he was like, no. So I just threw some on in my car, and he was like, wait, people call this black metal? And that kind of stuck with me. It's like, yeah, why do they? Because really what Onslaught Kommand resembles more than anything is like old Repulsion demos or something, like primordial death grind stuff that was still a little bit janky in its playing. It was just trying to go really fast and really loud and really chaotic. I guess as far as established war metal stuff that people would be more familiar with, this would be cut from the same cloth as something like, war metal is debatable, but something like Sadistic Execution, or maybe Bestial Warlust, but like a little bit more put together. Definitely
also more down-tuned than either of those. Those are both trebly.
Yeah, those are both trebly. This is very down-tuned.
Might be a little like Manticore.
Manticore.
Who I think they had a new one maybe this year, and I think we missed it. But that was a good band. I did
see that. Yeah, now Manticore was very cool. I got to go back. That would be fun to do like a little roundup at the end of the year.
Yeah, keep that as a ringer. Yeah.
I think it is really cool. This is a really concise demo. This is 6 tracks in under 13 minutes, and it's just a ripper all the way through. It's a distinct statement of intent. It is, I don't know, it's just really cool to see this style being played again. And insofar as it does have any relation to black metal, it has a relation to stuff like The Oath of Black Blood by Beherit. Mm-hmm. You know, the noisiest and most obnoxious sort of like basement black death of the Finnish scene.
Vaughn.
Yeah, and Vaughn is going to be a big part here, too. It's just really cool, and the whole aesthetic is extremely death metal. All the lyrics are just about people getting murdered and stuff. It's like, it's a refreshing palate cleanser, you know?
Yeah, these are very old-school extreme metal lyrics and song titles, and so without further ado, it's time for Carbonized at the Lynching Tree. So one theme for tonight is going to be me insisting on important differences between extremely primitive riffs. And that was a sick D-beat riff.
Oh, that that one stuck out to me too. That's like a classic sort of like Napalm Death on their earliest stuff would have done riffs like that.
That's a really it's like something on Scum. It's very, you could compare it to Coffins too, but it's not really a Coffins thing. It's not like flabby enough. Mm-hmm. It's a really good use of just very deliberate pacing. It's a long riff, and it's taking advantage of that thrash, palm mute and thrash pedal point format to write what's basically a D-beat riff. It's I also like the little the chord at the end rings more. It's like he throws in the octave there or something. Do you hear what I mean?
There's an
like
overtone there.
It's not exactly epic, but there's a more sort of there's a brighter chord at the end, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's it's the distinction when it comes to really primordial riffs like that. It's like the distinction that makes it a metal riff rather than a hardcore riff.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, that's a good way of putting it. It's a very metal way of writing a D-beat riff. It sounds like Moment Maniacs. Also, that's one of many Marduk side projects.
You've mentioned them on the show before.
But so that's really cool. I would say one of the weaknesses of this record is there could be a little more bespoke work on the riffs throughout. The sound quality is so fucking good, right? The tone is awesome. The vocals sound really good. I feel like there are filler riffs in certain places, like the like where I just feel like you could write a riff that's has the same number of notes or even fewer and would just be a little more distinctive.
Yeah, it could just be a matter of like shaping what's there a little bit more. I mean, with stuff like this, I don't put really a high priority on like individual riffs. This is to me music that's like about aggregate effect. So it's like I can kind of forgive that.
I mean, I agree. I think like that's this band is clearly capable of writing really cool riffs, and so presumably that's why they're just like, yeah, we just need like one of those riffs there, right? Mm-hmm. Like I get it, and listening to it another time tonight, I'm more inclined to say that part sounds fine, honestly. Like, and I also like the slowdown they do with that after.
Well, this is a very different thing to listen to on headphones versus speakers.
Yeah. So how would you describe? I think I completely agree. How would you describe that?
Oh, well, the bass is just fucking overwhelming. Like the bass is louder than the guitars when you're listening on headphones, and it's like it is what you would call like badly produced, but in a very cool way, in that it's like there's been no like high pass filter on this stuff at all, so you're getting all the horrible sub bass rumble that makes everything around it clip. Like it's really cool. It's how this stuff should sound.
The sound is awesome. I think if they could get it to sound more like that on speakers too, that would be awesome. Because so for me, when I put on the headphones, it's like suddenly I'm not caring about the riffs as much because the sound is just enveloping. Right?
Yeah, the timbre just totally takes control.
And the focus is on bass, bass tone and rhythm and stuff. And that's how it should be. This music like this, you want to be able to have it at maximal effectiveness when it is blasted on speakers. Mm-hmm. So that might be like a production trick to work on, because you got to have it sound that disgusting when you're like bumping it in the car or, playing it at a weird party.
You're trying to clear a room at a party. You know? It's like, oh, who invited them again?
Mm-hmm. Hey, this is fun music.
This is fun for me. I don't know if you're having fun. I'm not really concerned. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to my pick. I love the hilarious passive voice of this song title, which is "Becoming a Gut Pile." It's just like the phrasing there is hilarious to me for some reason. And this is a really cool song because it's super incoherent and very strangely shaped. And here I want to kind of draw attention to something
like a gut pile.
Yeah, like a gut pile. Yeah, it's sort of amorphous and asymmetrical. And I want to draw attention here to something that used to be really important, but has been kind of forgotten, which is war metal's sort of relationship to gore grind, like early gore grind stuff, which is very apparent on a lot of early war metal stuff, but it's been kind of jettisoned, but definitely not for Onslaught Kommands. They're keeping it gore 100%. So originally I was going to talk about, like, War Metal's relationship to, like, the first Carcass record, but what that track really sounds like is like an old Impetigo song. Or maybe something by Righteous Pigs or Hideous Manglia. Some of these, like, early death grind bands that are, like, footnotes in the Relapse Records catalog nowadays, but were really formative and important back then. And they still do really cool music because death grind back then wasn't a concept that was as firmly established as it is now. So you would just have kind of like wild, weird stuff happening. Like that big lurching main riff in that song, that
Yeah.
That's totally like an Impetigo thing because they were kind of death and kind of grind and kind of punk and kind of rock and roll all at the same time. And you can't really get riffs like that without that weird melange of influences. And these guys seem dedicated to that kind of authenticity.
There's something weirdly subtle there, too, because where they introduce that one of the heaviest parts of the song, and this is rare, one of the heaviest parts of the song is the dropout.
Yeah.
Right? and it goes just like... And the way they introduce the riff is crushing because they're playing it like at 2/3 or a half of the speed you'd expect it. And the funny thing is, if this were like Coffins or something, right, or a band in that vein, or like, say, like a really gory modern gore grind or porno grind band, they would continue playing it at that tempo with a really flabby skank.
Yeah.
But there's actually there's actually a tempo change after that. Like when it drops in, the D beat I'm pretty damn sure the chords are coming faster in the D beat part than they are over the dropout.
I just realized the notation for that riff, that da 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 da. It's really cool. It's really heavy, right? It's also the music you hear in every scene of a factory at work from a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. It's da 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 da.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, and we are back and ready to discuss a split between Geheimnisvoll and Kaban in Cyrillic. This is out on Nithstang Productions. It's been a while since we checked in with Nithstang, and a while since anyone heard from Geheimnisvoll. This is a band that was sort of starting to attain some underground hype right as the lockdown era rolled in. And then after that point, the band sort of receded to the shadows, and now it is back. And it's interesting. It's cool that it's back, and it seems to be a solo project, so it's cool that he's back. So there's been an interesting thing that's happened, right? The first EP was this sort of hyper minimal stuff that had this kind of Franco-Finnish riffs, like one massive Sargeist style hook on it, but was really a lot more like how you have described a core USBM aesthetic from Judas Iscariot and stuff.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of commonality between some of those melodic ideas.
Yeah, Judas Iscariot may in fact be one of the sources for that style in general, like for the Finns and French, and certainly coexisting in the late 90s. So although there were these big hooks on it, it really was a lot more like bleak trudging and blurred out static. Heavy use of distortion on vocals, but instead of doing the thing where it just takes aggressive vocals and makes them sound weaker, here it was really being used to create this like wash of it. Almost at times it sounded like a distant eagle, at other times it sounded like waves washing up on the shore or something, the vocals. So like really abstract vocals, which was cool, using them as an instrument. And if it had come out 10 years earlier, people would have called it, or 15 years earlier, people would have called it a DSBM record, I think.
Yeah. Well, it definitely would have been slotted alongside stuff like Leviathan and Zaster, even though musically it has like almost none of the same DNA.
Yeah, it would have been close to the first Drowning the Light or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, so then he did a split with Borda's rope, and at that point it moved more towards what we now think of as the Franco-Finnish style. So just like big riff, big riff, big riff, and much more focus on the sort of like broad chords that you get on Satanic Warmaster records, and broad chords, lots of movement in the melodies, etc. So the Sargeist influence sticks around, but it sounds way more like the poppier side of the Finnish stuff, but still with this sort of blown out USBM production. And then it just sort of disappeared, and in a way, it sucks for this guy that that the project wasn't able to keep its momentum as the style crested, right? Because if there was going to be a Geheimnisvoll full length over the last couple of years, it would have done really well because there was so much demand for this sort of sound, right? But in a way, I feel like it's a kind of an artistic blessing, because that sort of the Franco-Finnish stuff has kind of crested. There's been supreme saturation of it. It has inadvertently become the new pop black metal. And you sort of inadvertently dodged that bullet.
Well, it would have
been caught up in all that.
It would have also gotten lost in kind of the glut of Instagram tape black vampire stuff too,
on which I think it was influential.
Yeah.
Not like the most influential, right? We'd have to go back to like Sanguine Relic or whatever, but but yeah, it would have got lost in that stuff, and which would have been a shame because it's always been, a number of cuts above that and, authentic, whereas that stuff is false. So the sound, at the same time, there have been trends in the music have changed in some different ways. So taste has shifted towards, even as that, Sargeist Satanic Warmaster stuff got really huge, at the same time, people started shifting towards an interest in brighter, bolder sounds, right? For better or worse, right? So on the one hand, it exaggerates the pop black tendency even further and becomes, all sorts of things. On the other hand, it becomes like the stuff we call solar black metal, right? Or maybe some of the outlaw rock stuff. And you might think that a band that had these big Finnish hooks might move more towards this sort of like, the hyper ornate sort of, Galal-based guitar style that's being used to make pop black, or towards the Vofana worship thing, or whatever. But he has not. He's actually moved in the opposite direction, and this sounds a lot more just sort of like bold, direct, and sort of manly. And the production is really different. It, instead of being like receding behind the wall of fuzz, it's very forthright and powerful, and the riffs are pared back significantly. So it's actually gone a very different path from one that it could have gone, and has sort of come out the other end of this trend peak with a distinct sound. And I don't know. That was a long preface, but does that all compute to you?
It all basically computes to me. I think that this is a project that is probably interested in and to some degree influenced by a lot of the stuff that we're really into, that is in many respects like, we would argue, sort of outside of black metal at this point. That's like just sort of progressed so far it doesn't really count as like part of the parent genre anymore. But Geheimnisvoll itself seems very concerned with maintaining itself as a black metal band first and foremost. So while you're going to hear melodic ideas that are going to be very similar to some of the outlaw rock stuff, or sort of the predecessor to that, this whole solar metal idea, it's structured and it's executed in such a way that it's much more definitively black metal and much more definitively related to like traditional Scandinavian black metal in a lot of ways. I would also argue, and it's not just because of the cover track here, the emphasis here is much more distinctly on sort of French riff figures rather than Finnish ones. So I think what we're seeing is, I would argue whether Franco-Finnish has reached a full point of saturation. I think it's reached a point of saturation for us just because we covered so much of it in the first couple years of the show. But
Fair enough. Yeah.
I bet the Franco-Finnish thing is going to continue being a huge thing for at least the next 5 years. Because it's going to take a long time for that to trickle all the way out. It's going to require like 8 bands.
It's going to be like Orthodox.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the point where there's like 8 bands on Candlelight and Seasons of Mist that all sound like Sargeist yet. You know?
Oof. Yeah.
Well, that'll happen.
We're starting to get it. But yeah, it's so I think the switch towards the French bands I think is a very good point. And by the way, yeah, we're going to talk about the other side. Sure, we'll get into the Kaban side, but we're just rolling with this for now. So so the cover here is a cover of my favorite Seigneur Voland song, Aigle Conquérant, right? So Conquering Eagle, and it's a really good cover. He fleshes out the harmonies and changes up the feel of the song in a bit, in a way, so that it's actually a highlight rather than a sort of like token thing that you always skip.
Well, yeah, and it's also, it's not the opening track off that EP, which is the one that everyone covers, and it is like the track that launched Franco-Finnish black metal in a sense, That main riff on the first track off the Seigneur Voland EP is like, that is the blueprint for everything after.
Yeah, so it's like the you're saying it's not that track.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not that track, which suggests to me, I mean, this is like maybe a bit of a reach. It's a statement that says, yes, I understand that what I'm doing is related to this, and I do appreciate that, but also I appreciate the aspects of it that may have been overlooked by others.
Oh, you're talking about like are you talking about Le Jour de Dieu sont comptés?
I think so. I just listened to the whole EP because it's just like 20 minutes long, so I never remember the track.
Oh, wait, no, so actually, the Conquering Eagle is the first track on the EP.
I listen to the comp usually.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, there are a lot of different ways, a lot of tracks, the same tracks, or different recordings on different things. But basically, like, this one is, they have some songs that have really, really big riffs, big, elaborate, glorious, dopamine gratifying riffs. This one is a lot more sparse and bleak and stern. It's very epic, but in a way that is like specifically martial. And you could say that the whole Geheimnisvoll side of this is a much more warlike sound than their old stuff, which was a lot more sort of cryptic and, not in the bad sense, vampiric.
So, with that being said, do we want to hear big riffs? I want to hear big riffs.
Always.
All right, so in that case, let's listen to the second track, Shadows of Agony, which is nothing but candy for the death metal guy all the way through. So obviously the huge one there is the that big like strutting slowdown riff that comes in second on that sample, which is a technique that is used a lot by Seigneur Voland, and it's used a lot by Sargeist, but it's forgotten by most of the imitators of the Franco-Finnish style, because people pare Franco-Finnish down to just the most epic or the most tragic sounding stuff, and they don't realize that it's like the native representatives of that style have like a ton of groove in them, and that's something that's maintained here.
Yeah, and that was also a strength in the earliest Geheimnisvoll stuff too, especially as the record went on. You're like, oh wait, there's just like this, just sort of punk, slowed down punk skanks, and that was like, like, I mean, I feel like a lot of the people who do the imitation Finn Black stuff are they still have mid-tempo parts, but the mid-tempo parts are like strictly lifeless rote things that you could just clip out in Pro Tools, right? Like,
I mean the problem with any of these sort of like imitative styles, obviously this project excluded because this has a much more like interior view of it. The problem with all these imitative styles is that they just strip out the most obvious elements of them that make them distinct, build projects entirely around those distinctions, and then forget to backfill it with actual content. Yes. It's like, it's like they were like, oh, well, we cut out all the parts of Sargeist that we thought were kind of boring, not realizing that those were the things that like allowed the big moments to happen. You know, and Geheimnisvoll is a band that understands, like, how you pace a black metal song. It can't be all the big thing all the time. I say as a person who regularly asks for the big thing all the time.
The other cool thing about this track is that it doesn't, although it's super catchy. These are all just, like, big, gratifying, epic Dorian scale kind of riffs. But they are, there's no flag as to which is the hook riff. And they are severely pared back. These are like 5 or 6 chord notes, the riffs often. Like, with focused on simple chord shapes, and the mood throughout, although it is certainly like very noble, is really bleak. There's a solemn, and the bleakness is sort of smeared from riff to riff. There's a very consistent atmosphere.
Yeah, and speaking of...
Yeah, go.
Oh, no, I was going to finish your thought. I was going to segue for a second.
Go for it.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, well, something that you say, is like the idea of the pared back chording and stuff is very interesting, because we had to take a quick break because we were having some connection issues, and we were talking about the Seigneur Voland cover, and I realized, I kept going back and forth because I'm like, this doesn't sound like the same song. But it turns out that... Aigle Conquérant is the song that I'm thinking of, the beginning of the Seigneur Voland EP, but the way Geheimnisvoll executes it kind of buries the lead of the main melody on the giant riff that defines that song and completely like reinterprets it as sort of a straight power chord riff, which suggests that he hears these kinds of things, this sort of Franco-Finnish style, very differently than a lot of other people do.
Yeah, so the big riff is... Yeah,
it's the riff from which the whole style descends.
However, unlike a lot of the sort of most flashy riffs in that style, it is a very austere and solemn riff. It's just moving down a chord progression in this kind of elegant, gliding way.
Yeah, if you listen very closely, one of the guitars is etching out that traditional French melody, but it's way buried.
It's way buried, and what's in the front is, just like almost like a one-note power chord trem thrash, and under it, just huge bass, which is another strength of this EP, and which is part of what makes the mid-tempo part so strong.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, because like just thinking about that sort of reinterpretation of this classic idea, suggest that's one of the reasons Geheimnisvoll is so different, because he's taking in these Franco-Finnish influences that at this point are like standard issue for like black metal musicians now, but he's hearing it in a radically different way. The things that are significant to him are very different from a lot of other people, which results in very different music.
Yeah. All right. So here, another thing is that like this is still full of catchy moments, just not in a cheap way. Right, so here's the so maybe yours was the most solemn. Mine is actually maybe one of the more the first track is like very major key and a sort of like aggressive, resolute major key. I feel like it's a cool idea, and I like the rough-hewn simplicity there, but I'm not sure, the riffs just aren't as compelling to me as they are on some of the other tracks. I feel like on this third track, Final Destiny, Gathered by the Winds, he sort of brings that bleak brightness together with the more traditional scowling, sliding Dorian chord stuff that we just heard. And I think this track is great, and a sort of it's a great example of maximalist minimalism. Well, there's your Corellian Satanist madness riff, but you have to go
right
12.
At the very end.
You have to go 12 minutes. Yes. And at that point, it's just been launched by the whole song, which has these kinds of gradually ascending energy.
Yeah, it's got that barreling momentum to it. Every riff naturally collapses into the next one in a linear fashion.
Yeah, and could you hear how, like, the sense that, like, there were a lot of, it's like these were brighter tones. There was a lot of major chording happening there, but it still had that sort of gratifying sort of minor key epic grit to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, another interesting thing about his playing is that he's doing a technique that's sort of like forgotten, like a traditional like French riffcraft technique, which is so we all know how to play the game of doing Sargeist riffs by basically you take like a punk root note structure and then you're just rapping sort of minor key melodies.
Take a power chord and you move up a half step so it's a minor sixth, and then you move back to the power chord, and then you take the fifth away so it's a modified power chord,
and then you go to the bar, and then you go to the minor third, all the standard stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have forgotten that there's a lot of French bands in the old school as well as nowadays that are building melodies like purely out of those like inverted power chords and moving them around in the manner that you would like a regular power chord riff. So the result of that is just something that feels radically different in timbre, just because you don't have the same body that you're used to of traditional power chord shapes. You just have this sort of like vaguely sour, even though it's all in key motion around the fretboard. And I think it's really interesting. It just it
builds more tension into the chord. I mean, like death metal bands use that sometimes.
Yeah, it's a technique that doesn't it lacks the sort of bodily satisfaction of the standard big Franco-Finnish riffs, which is why the imitators don't fucking use them anymore, because they're too hard and weird, but they're like a definitive part of the French style.
Yeah, well, and obviously, the cool hybrid riff at the end where we get one of these punkish sections now, but like with a, a lot more of an oi vibe there, or but the it's a cool hybrid. It's got like multiple and sometimes it's like a thrash riff, Finn Black riff hybrid. But it's very carefully and deliberately paced, kind of like in the way that first Onslaught Kommand D-beat riff was, actually. It sort of takes its time, and there's a really cool... You stress the Scandinavian thing. The way it shifts to blasts in the middle is super Norwegian. It shifts from the skank to the blast beats in the middle of the riff, but without losing momentum, which is the kind of thing that a band like Emperor would do at the very beginning.
Yeah, it is structurally very beholden to traditional black metal, and as much as I enjoy a lot of the stuff that is like going so far out that it's going so far out it sort of like goes beyond the threshold of black metal. It's cool to see people executing this in a traditional way that is very authentic to the sort of systems used in the original music.
Yeah, stoked for the full length, which I assume is coming. All right, and after my connection dropping again, we are now rolling on into the Kaban. So, this project is from the Horrible Room scene from Russia, the Horrible Room crew. And this is a collection of bands that is basically like... transplanted the Legion Blotan concept from the UK to Russia. So gritty, noisy, stripped down black metal that has a lot to do with the mysterious guy hardcore of the early 2000s, but through that also a lot to do with Oi and RAC, and also a lot to do with noise music of various kinds and industrial. So this sort of... basically, we've talked before, especially towards the beginning of the show, about like there are certain black metal bands that are metal bands, and then there are other ones that are really hard to define as being metal at all, but somehow it is black metal, right? You can basically make black metal with just punk parts and sort of folk and classical and vaguely metal ideas of melody, right? And so the Horrible Room bands are very focused on this like building black metal from punk parts thing. The last we covered one thing from them before, and which was probably maybe the most metal thing they put out, which was the Leshy EP, which was a phenomenal release from well over a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah, it was a while back. I think it was like March.
Yeah, that made my year end. That was super cool. It was basically like Senor Valand worship, but actually the more you listened to it, the more it had going on. Up there with Geheimnisvoll for a really true take on that style. However, on this half of the EP, or the split rather, they're much closer to the bread and butter sort of stompy raw black sound. However, it's a very interesting... So I guess you could say this is I beat Ildjarn worship. However, kind of with a twist. And I told you, death metal guy, like, this will be the first thing that sounds like Ildjarn that you like.
And you were somehow correct. How did the fuck did you call that? Exactly. Like, I had huge doubts when you, like, mentioned that to me. Because I mean, there's, like, stuff in that vein that I'll appreciate. But in general, I just don't like it. This is the first one that I, like uncritically enjoy. And I can't specify why. I like it so much more than all the other Ildjarn type stuff.
Well, it's got a thing that separates it, which is it really seems focused less on the thrashing 1-2 beat parts, and a lot more on these dramatic slowdowns with extended droning repetition, and that makes it it makes it a lot more like industrial music.
It's what was I was like, I get a big, like, Ride for Revenge vibe off a lot of the Kaban side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think the other thing is just, like, I was trying to think about, like, why I like this so much more than, like, a lot of the other material in the same style. And I think that it's just, like, Ildjarn and a lot of bands similar to Ildjarn are just, like, in sort of a weird middle space where I either want it to be much more melodic or much more grotesque. And Kaban just goes really fucking grotesque with it. So it starts to resemble just, like, really putrid, bizarre, like, say, like, Portuguese black metal, or, like, you compared it to, like, abruptum in sort of a loose sense. And I pick up on all of that. This is more akin to some of the really extreme doom stuff that I like versus Ildjarn, even though it's built out of Ildjarn parts.
I think the thing that makes Ildjarn really extreme, which is the way these kind of, like, meshing black metal chords sort of they're like sort of textured trem lines, often sort of clashing with each other and intersecting in really dissonant or strange ways. That's just, like, not... There's a certain kind of, like, abrasive high-end guitar that I like more than you do.
Yeah.
So, like, that kind of... And this kind of edge between, you know, folkish melody and, like, harsh dissonance. And that's just more my territory, you know? It's... you know, even so, I do think Ildjarn is difficult to listen to, and certainly not an everyday for me. It's just something I strongly approve. But so, yeah, the kinds of things that you want for, like, real wretched rawness are less on Ildjarn and more here. I totally get that. This is more like abruptum, and it's more like demoncy.
Yeah. No, I didn't even think of demoncy. Yeah, this is totally fucking demoncy music, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's give them a taste of it. I've got the first sample. This is just from the first track. They're all just numerically titled. So this is from 1 into the very beginning of 2, just so you can hear how it's sort of sequenced and paced. And get ready for Industrial Burzum. That's a good I beat riff.
Yeah.
You know, sinister, undulating, sort of narrow and sharp. However, it's not really the center of the music. And in that sense, Kaban really is a lot like Leshy, in that it sort of head faints towards a genre that is very popular in the underground now, but actually, like, is actually working with a much wider range of influences and a higher concept.
Yeah, this is very, like, deliberately executed stuff. You know, it's always kind of a toss-up when you listen to stuff like this, if it's, like, one, very off-the-cuff and improvisational, or if it's very considered, and I think Kaban's on the very considered side. Also,
these guys have big record collections.
Yeah, it also occurs to me that one of the reasons I like this so much is because this is totally, like, CDR black metal energy. This is totally the kind of thing I would have bought out of, like, Rusty Axe Records discount bin back in 2005.
Well, as is the next thing we're going to review.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's going to be a lot of commonalities with the next record. Yeah, it's definitely that. It also strikes me as being, like, there's a spiritual affinity with, like, the really wonky LLN stuff that I'm super into. There's a lineage of, like, very weird, very minimal, very experimental black metal shaped musical objects out there that this is a part of, and I get really into it.
Yeah, so one cool thing there, so you can hear, like, the basically sort of, like, early, you know, like, early Black Death or Doom guitar playing with just that sweet pick slide.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an Ildjarn thing to do.
Yeah, that's like a necroschisma thing.
You can hear that the melody really sounds a lot more like, you know, Dunkelheit or something, right? It's those are like early, those are hypnotic first gen Burzum melodies. And the really cool thing that I like there, and it happens again and again in the slow parts, is the percussion, which is not working in the standard rhythmic forms of black metal. It's sort of like clattering, abrasive, just sort of like clack, 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 drum machine. It's like it's heavy in an industrial way, and it really reminds me of the earliest Death in June stuff, like Nado, or maybe even more so Break the most aggressive parts on Break the Black Ice, or also the earliest Coil, like Scatology, where they have some just very heavy tracks that are centered around weaponized drum machine.
Yeah, I mean the choice is very deliberate there, and the other thing that strikes me is this has been composed with like a deliberate artlessness. You know, like for instance that big lurching kind of doomy riff that this centers around is. Dun dun da 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 dun dun da da da.
Yeah.
So you'll hear riffs like that now, but like most of the time, at the very end there, where we rise up to that high chord, there would be a little dissension on the turnaround back to the root. Here, there's not that. It just, like, bangs out that high chord and restarts. Like, it's deliberately angular and blocky in a way that is... To arrive back, you have to have been playing guitar for 6 months, or you have to have been playing for 20 years to do that. You know what I mean? To get back at that kind of idea. And the whole record, the whole side by Kaban of this record is kind of like that. It's like very deliberately angular and uncomfortable and violating a lot of the standard notions of how black metal guitar is supposed to be played.
Yeah, all right. So let's go to your sample.
Cool, let's go to the part that sounds like fucking Ride for Revenge. So this is the third track, and it is just so cool, and I love how on all of these Kaban songs, nothing happens, but in a very cool way. So let's just go to a place and sink into it for a while. You know, I am a man whose tastes in art you could sort of describe as like no middle sliders on character creation screen. Like,
yeah, actually, that's true. Yeah.
So I very regularly criticize bands for like when they give me the sense of like, oh, these songs are kind of like still and motionless. They're not really progressing anywhere, unless you very deliberately make it perfectly still and motionless and going nowhere. That's what Kaban does here, and it's fucking sick. I love that nothing happens, that it's just two sadistic, alternating, satanic junkie riffs, and that's just the whole song. And I like the fact that it's the most obnoxious cymbal sound in the world just being played at like continuous eighth notes. I have such an appreciation for music that courts like being deliberately sort of obnoxious and unlistenable in this way, because it does like have a mood unto itself. There's something like genuinely sinister about this that I don't get from a lot of black metal, and I think part of that has to do with the abstract senselessness of it that is clearly very like deliberately arranged with an artist's hand, but could be mistaken for like just sheer fucking like incompetent madness. I really like it.
Oh, I think part of the rule for this has to be like, you can't say you can't play that riff, right? Like, these are such elemental, basic ideas that are like, you know, really parts of riffs rather than riffs. And the point is they just play them because, you know, nobody can stop them. And it's, you know, at the same time, yeah, it's really brutal and sort of senseless and motionless, structurally motionless. But it also, because they have that insistent eighth note pulse, it also keeps some drive to it, which is important to me. And the bass line, you know, although it is this sort of like, you know, junky black metal riff, it's also like a really epic. It's also just like the riff to Joy Division's Shadow Play,
which you were singing while I was playing.
Yeah.
I was like, black metal guy, I'm trying to get up the gumption to finally do heroin, and you're really ruining it for me right now.
All right, and we're back from talking about the Northern Boys to review a kind of strangely kindred release, De Dode roept by Wrok from Heidens Hart Records.
Dutch is such a bizarre language.
Yes. It's Wrok with a W. W-R-O-K. And this is... I mean, how to introduce it? Well, one of the glorious things about Heidens Hart is that the sole proprietor, Arjan, release things on as nice vinyl editions purely because he thinks they have historical importance. Not with complete disregard for what will sell or what will be cool or what are the trends. It's sort of a kamikaze record label. And he did a really fine double LP of Wrok demos. And I ordered it a couple years back, and I was playing it for my buddies and sort of just dancing around like a goblin in the living room. And one of them was just like, dude, I think this is bad for your mental health. So this is highly music adjacent black metal, and it is it's ultra primitive scraping basement noise. However, with some real musical or anti-musical substance to it. What else to say? I mean, before we get into the music, maybe we want to start with the mythos. Apparently, Wrok were famous in the late 90s Dutch scene for just being maniacs. The second of the two, the second of those Wrok demos was that were released on Heidens Hart. Duisternus is a, quote, great-sounding unreleased rehearsal demo from 1997. This was originally planned to be released by Nazgul's Eerie, but considered to be too extreme. Imagine out-extreming other black metal guys in the late 90s. Right? That's far out. Okay, wait, maybe it's not a double LP, it's just a single LP, but my point stands. And so there's also press material that talks about their, for this new record, that talks about, expect nothing but pure bestial and primordial possession as their legacy of highly controversial shows confirms. So I wrote to Heidens Hart and I inquired as to the nature of those controversial shows, and we got an answer, which I will simply read. Yes, this was in 96 at the Barothrum Sabbat Countess Wrok show in Rotterdam. A few days before the concert, there was an extremely violent fight between soccer hooligans of Rotterdam versus Amsterdam. Those two cities are the biggest in the Netherlands, and of course, it's the eternal question. Do you support this or that? Anyway, the hooligans arranged to meet up in some field and fight. It got into a huge fight, and someone actually died there. The band played video clips of this fight, along with concentration camp footage, serial killers, war, etc. on the video screen during the concert. They are not Nazis, but just wanted to shock in any way possible. Remember, this was 96, so a whole different time. True. Then they covered the stage and floor of the backstage in pig's blood, dead animals everywhere, etc. So when the footage of the dead soccer hooligan appeared on the screen, the venue literally switched off the power and kicked them out. Total rock and roll.
Very like Hanatarash energy there.
This is what punk should have been, right? This was like the first 2 years of punk rock energy. Just this all-devouring negativity vortex. And what do you make of the music, death metal guy?
So it's interesting because I haven't heard the older Wrok material, although you've spoken about it in the kind of hushed tones that indicates that it's probably right up my alley. This was simultaneously more and less musical than I expected. Based on your description, I was expecting just sort of like maniacal clattering black noise stuff. I guess I was thinking like more abruptum-y. What's here is more like metal, but it also just, it is stripped bare of like musicality in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about with this in relation to the Kaban that we just spoke about, in that they're kind of executing similar stuff, but with a very different vocabulary. This is primordial extreme metal. I don't even know if I can call it like black metal itself, because there's not really black metal riffs. These are more like angular Celtic frost riffs, played at occasionally frantic tempos.
We call Celtic Frost a black metal band.
Yeah, we call Celtic Frost. Well, we call Celtic Frost every kind of metal. They're the first extreme metal band in a lot of ways.
I would say the energy here is very black metal, but I take your point. I think this is another really good example of black metal that's not really made with any metal parts.
Well, yeah, and I would also argue that maybe this is one of the rare cases where it's like, this is still black metal, even though the vibe is very, it doesn't appear to be about typical black metal topics. It appears to just be about, like, death and suffering.
Yeah, this is definitely not a sort of, like, it's not martial or glorious. The lyrics, so here's the funny thing about this band, or the interesting thing, right? The lyrics focus on extreme misery and pain. Just like they're doing their best to be as fucking sick as possible. The album cover to this is just people who've hanged themselves, including a small woman or girl. This record is apparently, quote, dedicated to all victims of suicide. Wrok hopes this album pushes you over the edge.
Fuck yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. See,
yeah, well, yeah, that's like a thing that was like a thing in black metal up until like what, 2002 or something.
2010, I'd say. Like,
oh, even then, no one was taking Leviathan or Zaster that seriously. You know, it's like
no, but like DSBM stuff at that. When was Abyssic Hate? Right?
That was early. That was
yeah. He said something about that. Anyway, point being, yes. The idea that you wanted to make music so miserable it actually killed people was kind of a big part of the scene back then.
And also, and moreover, just the idea of, like, black metal about being a piece of shit. Like black metal for bad people, and not, like, in the cool satanic tyrant overlord way, in the I'm just a bad person that likes hurting people way.
Yeah, like I stabbed a guy for no reason kind of thing.
Exactly, like, which is something I'm very into as a death metal guy, and I wish I saw a little bit more of in black metal nowadays.
Yeah, that was a big part of the kind of small a anarchic energy of the early second wave scene, right? A kind of like just utter lawlessness.
Yeah, full schizo energy.
Yeah. You do things so fucking amoral and you do things so grotesque that they don't even fit in like sort of amoral noble ethics, right? They're not. It's not even like Viking shit. You're just acting like a schizo.
It's just degenerate. Yeah.
yeah. You're being dishonorable and grotesque, and that was part of the energy back then, and this band really taps into that. And I guess that's the other. That leads us to the other thing, which is that, as you've heard from us cackling, the point is that there is a deranged glee to this.
They're having a great time doing this.
These guys aren't necessarily going out and literally stabbing people, right? John Notveit did that, right? And his music sounded pretty different. Yeah. But they are certainly, just sort of reveling in the sheer over-the-top absurdity of the negativity and just omnidirectional aggression.
Yeah, it's kind of like Torture Doom, in that you can tell the sick joy that those guys get out of making it.
Yeah, like a certain kind of totally fucked person finds this very fun music, and that would definitely include both of us. Yeah. So without further ado, here is the track that made my friend question my sanity. This is the first track of the Aunt Gravenus demo, just to give you an idea of how this band sounded back in the late 90s. This is Blanke Wapens.
That is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So if you change the vocal production a little bit and you blew it out with more delay, you could release that now as like high-minded industrial black metal on Sentient Ruin.
Yeah, you could like change the production, make it like booming and cavernous.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. That is 50% like gabber techno by weight.
Yeah. Wasn't that shit really big in the Low Countries?
Gabber was developed in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. I confirmed it while it was playing, because I thought so, and it would have been right in the pocket of like the boom in the early to mid-90s when that started getting really big. So rock was heavily clear. Dude, those like kick drum flurries, you were not going to fucking get that anywhere in the metal scene. That is 100% gabber and speedcore stuff.
Well, it's kind of like stuff in Brutal Death. It's kind of like stuff on Graveland Records. But yeah, it's totally its own thing.
Yeah, or it's like maybe it's Mysticum a little bit. You know, at the dancier moments of Mysticum. But yeah, no,
Mysticum isn't as dancey as they should be.
Yeah, Mysticum is one of those. Mysticum is unfortunately kind of a cooler idea than it actually is an execution. Yeah. But I love the idea. So.
Oh, for sure.
But no, that was funny. It was like, so it's like a gabber thing. That's fucking cool, man.
Yeah, well, it's like what we found out about like Lycathia Flame being really My Bloody Valentine influenced, right? It's like it was a thing where some like, you know, extreme metal dudes just like were doing a ton of E in the 90s. Like to some degree extreme metal just skipped the 90s, but you know, in interesting ways that they intersected. So I mean, that's a key point, is that rock is dance music. Mm-hmm. You are supposed to hop around like a goblin to this. I mean, I guess, or kill yourself, but I think you'd probably have more fun if you hopped around like a goblin.
That's the thing. The kind of people who would kill themselves to rock would never listen to rock. The only people who will listen to this are people who take sick glee in it, you know?
Exactly, yeah. Oh, man, there's this... Did you catch the moment where there's just this... They just go to the even more retarded version of the retarded riff, and he just goes, rock.
Well, yeah, and those are also not really black metal riffs. Those are weird, sort of like ministry riffs or something.
Well, no, what they are, the dung 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 dung. That is, as you say, it's very Celtic Frost. What that is you're doing the sort of more dissonant version of the thrash metal, Eastern scales in thrash metal, right? That's part of what made Black and Death tonality is like you play like the one minor third, the jun jun, and then you add that sick major key interval above it. So it's supposed to be like dung 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 dung. But instead, they just hang on the major thing, so it sounds like sickly perky almost. But like, if you're at all listening, if you have listened to metal before, right, you hear that and you can tell that it sort of just implies the dissonance around it. And and then when they return to it, they just do an even more bludgeoning version of it, where they just hit the one note, one note, one note, one note, one note forever until the major third, and that's just like the turnaround. I hear your point about like ministry and industrial and stuff, but I feel like you were right about Celtic Frost and Hellhammer,
and just like primitive hardcore.
Yeah, Messiah by Hellhammer, right? And the general, although musically it's different because, like, this is musically way more minimalist, the unhinged energy of Triumph of Death, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's very interesting listening to that in conjunction with this new record, which is clearly of the same spirit but executed very differently.
Yeah, it's a lot less. So that is Wrok at its most sort of primitive, scraping, industrial. Even on the Dwysternus demo you can start to hear that like there are weird riffs being played, cool melodies, things that could be more typical black metal riffs, but because of the context aren't. There starts to be a sort of like low-key, still totally deranged, but like a low-key musicality to it. And on this record, we've got just like, in some ways, this is a record of much more straightforward bangers. Like, or I guess I consider that track a banger. So what do I mean? This is more like sort of noise thrashing punk rock.
Yeah, this is much more like music. It's not music, but it's like music. It's a music-shaped object.
It's music like adjacent.
Yeah. Well, let's hear some of this stuff, and then we can kind of dive into the differences between the eras.
So, compared to almost any other kind of black metal, this is not riffy music per se, but compared to what you just heard, this is this is Van Halen. So get ready for just a minute into the first track, Heraut van Noodlot and Dude. fast.
Very, very, like, unhinged fast. The kind of fast you only get when you are playing as fast as you can.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, what's there to say? Well, first of all, the sound on this record is phenomenal, at least in my book. Listen to this on speakers and turn it up as loud as you can without hitting pain threshold. The cool thing about this is that none of it is actually, like, needling. It doesn't have any of, like, the needling, annoying high tones that you often get with a lot of, like, raw black.
No, it's generally very midsy.
Yeah, it's sort of like just abrasive midsy noise. And if you turn it up and let it fill the room, it will put you in the basement where this was recorded. Works even better if you literally live in a basement.
If you're in a region that has basements.
Yes. But yeah, this is, you can really hear the room and you can hear the noise filling the room. It's not like cavernous empty space.
No, it's cluttered in a pleasant way. It's representative enough that you can hear everything that's happening, but it's melded together into a single sonic timbre that's really cool.
So yeah, I mean, a thing you wrote in the notes, but haven't said, but like it's a fair thing to say, right? Was that like the riffs don't matter at all?
Yeah, and I think that I saw you kind of disagree with that, and I think we're just talking past each other. I think that the melodic content of the riffs doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's true. Like you could change the intervals, and like I think the melodic content. Yeah, so like I think it's worth talking about the melodic content because it has something to do with the atmosphere. But yeah, I think you could write equally good versions of most of these riffs, changing the intervals around.
Yeah, I think that what we're disagreeing on is like, is the riff primarily a melody delivery system? I'm inclined to think it is, but there's also places where on a record like this, timbre and rhythm and I guess that it's important that the pitch fluctuates up and down for the guitars, yes. but the individual note it's hitting doesn't really matter.
I think that's right. Yeah, so I guess I would say if I had to define a riff, I'd say something like it's the basic unit of melody for the delivery of force. Right?
Yeah.
It's recognizably a melodic phrase, but the primary purpose of the riff should always be to just, like, crush and demolish and rip. And that's why when we talk about more elaborate bands, I try to call them melodies, not riffs. Like a band like Dawn might sequence their songs like thrash riffs, kind of, but those are melodies. Or even like the big riffs on Satanic Warmaster. Those are like fully developed melodies with like, there's a whole, as you would say, there's a whole drama or sort of action in the melody.
Yeah, and I mean that's a discussion in and of itself, is how the metal riff is, the metal riff as unit is probably the single thing that heavy metal as a genre has that is wholly unique to itself. There is no real equivalent to it, even in related genres like punk or hardcore. Those are not riffs in the same way.
Insofar as I would say Discharge does work the same way. However, the thing is, it's like Discharge just doesn't belong in the history of hardcore. It's like its own thing.
Yeah,
it has just as much to do with extreme metal. So yeah, but let's talk a little bit about the tonality. Yeah, so the tonality on the riffs is important, like the general chord language being used, the vibe. So the blast riff we faded out on, or yeah, I played that riff. How about you?
Oh yeah, I mean that's like the sort of like warm up thing I play at band practice,
Yeah, and so what's cool about that riff is that it's so primal, and it has it's sort of hidden, but it has this kind of like hybrid riff form to it. You do that first little half step bend or, wrist flick, right? And that gives it that tells us we're in evil thrash land. And then you just hit that big minor third 4 and you get this big manly pentatonic ascent. And you can hear that as bluesy, right? Or you can hear it as sort of, Euro-barbarian.
Well, yeah, it's like the Orgasmatron riff.
Yeah.
Yeah, da, 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 da. Yeah, it's like the same figure there.
Oh, it's like every Stooges riff on the first and second record, so you can hear it as garage punk, you can hear it as Motorhead, or you can hear it as like Carpathian Wolves Graveland.
Yeah, right? and really it's just primordial extreme guitar music. Yeah,
exactly. It is extreme guitar music at its most elemental. You could play that for the Stooges, and they'd be like, "Hey, that's a good one."
Yeah, it's interesting because there's also like deliberate restrictions at play where it's because I think the only chord shapes they're using across this whole thing are like regular power chords and bars. Like there's like no complex chord shapes. I think everything's diatonic. And what you get as a natural result is that pared back feeling of like mid to late 80s primordial extreme metal.
Except, let's talk about the hook riff there. So the riffs do kind of, even though melody is not the central thing, even though these are far more about rhythm and just tone or timbre or mood than they are about the melodies themselves, they do often function as hooks. So in this song, the hook has 2 notes. Right?
Yeah.
That's it, right? And what makes it a hook? Well, the root note, it's just root note trem, and it goes way longer than you'd expect. And if you're not used to extreme music, you'll just hear that as just this long, like barbarically long drone, right? It'll just sound violent to you. Mm-hmm. And if you're used to extreme music, you'll keep waiting for them to change the note, and you'll hear the place where they should, and the fact that it doesn't is a statement
in and of itself.
Yes, it's like whoa. And then finally, it sort of staggers down a whole step. However, it feel like he's fucking up the power chord in some way, like playing it really dissonantly, or there are 2 guitars or something, so that it's like he's gone down a whole step and a half step at the same time. It's just totally fucking skronked.
Yeah, it's like this is definitely the kind of band where you can imagine some of these riffs being like hit around this note, like just slide up on the fretboard really fast and try to land on 17. If you don't, it's fine. But try to.
That's like how you describe Mortician, right?
Yeah. It's just like get somewhere in the vicinity of or actually Devourment. The first Devourment record is like that, where it's just some of those grind riffs are just like move in this manner,
Well, in the spirit of gleefully, just gleefully complete evil, right? And
all those fit togetger pretty well.
Yeah. This is actually a lot like the brutal death stuff you like most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's deliberately amusical. It's interesting because it's so like deliberately non-musical, but it's built out of like all the energy you would get from listening to a Slayer record.
Exactly. It's like the Concrete Winds thing, right? It's like everything sounds wrong and horrible, or like sort of like extremely like primitive, but it all rips.
Yeah, that's like the essential quality of it. Most of this does function. It's so weird. It's like the grammar of this is completely metal, but the individual wording is like some fucked up alien language. You can see the structural relationship to metal, but like any individual moment just sounds bizarre. And then occasionally they dip into it getting really weird structurally, like on Het Zwaard van de Buil, which is a truly bizarre fucking song that is not shaped like anything I've heard in metal before. The points of emphasis in this song that are like peak moments are utterly counterintuitive. And it goes a bunch of different places and kind of nothing happens, and I love just how fucking demented this thing is. So yeah, and later on in the song, things get a little bit more active, but it really is like three halves of a song sort of arbitrarily bolted together in this just bizarre configuration. I love how like the first part of the song just sort of stops. It just sort of falls apart, and they're like, fuck it, next one. So start this new riff, and we'll just work on that for a while. It's like they're fucking giving up on the idea at random and then starting a new one, and I just fucking love it, dude. It's so cool.
It kind of works. It's like, I think it's very intuitive. Like, from our standards of what a song is, it's very arbitrary, but I feel like if you're jamming it out in the rehearsal room, it's super intuitive. It's like they literally had the big breakdown, and then they're just like, okay, next one.
This makes a lot more sense if you see the guitarist and the drummer kind of like looking at each other curiously while recording. You know, it's like then it all kind of fits together. If you put that mental image together, it's like, oh, I see. I think this is definitely a case where a lot of these songs are sort of like half structured, half improv-y. And this song I just love because of just how lopsided and fucking demented it is. And, like, why is that Marshall snare pattern going on way too long every time it pops up? And why are they kind of echoing the idea on the tom like it's gonna be this very connected motif, and then it just kind of stops? It's like, it's fascinating, yeah.
Well, speaking of, like, riffs that could be written with completely different notes, like the breakdown riff. So I was telling you, death metal guy, while I was listening, like, this is one of the peak moments of the record for me. I was listening to this just doing, like, you know, windmills and spin kicks in my room like a fucking hardcore goon. And the breakdown is crushing, and it's the kind of that's like a Ride for Revenge style breakdown.
Yeah.
And the rhythm in the guitar is really important, and where he changes the notes is really important. But it's all just half step and maybe like down a whole step stuff. And you could change the notes and it would be almost exactly the same. But it is very precisely written to change in those spots, and I thought there was some kind of like improv to it, but it repeats exactly every time.
Yeah, just that weird clanging low chord that they hit.
Yeah.
As like the denouement to that whole passage it's so strange. It's one of those things where it's like you think this is random, but they've made such deliberately wrong choices at every path that it's like you can only get a 0 on a test if you actually know what all the answers are.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's like, you know, where the place like da 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 da, like where the place where those half steps fall is like different each time they fall. Like they're not, the second one doesn't go in the same place as the first one or in one of the normal places it would go. It's really carefully timed out there. However, I think you're right that the overall structure of the song is totally like, all right, let's just see where the energy takes us.
I think another like weird understated influence here, just because so I started playing with a new band, and a lot of them are into like different kinds of black metal, and a lot of them are really into Juder, and I've been listening to more Juder lately, and it's very weird listening to those riffs, these incredibly blocky, like pure power chord riffs, but delivered with such speed and intensity that they attain a sort of abstraction of in and of themselves, even though they're just like the world's fastest Celtic frost riffs. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of the same vibe here of riffs that are so primitive and elemental they attain significance through that.
Yeah, I get that. And for listeners who don't know what he's saying, it's the TSJUDER, the sort of formative quote Norse core who did Desert Northern Hell.
Yeah, it's very strange music listening in 2022.
Yeah, so, I hear that. It kind of is like that, or like Panzer Division Marduk, right? It's just a different path to being completely monged.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, hey, it was the late 90s, we wore trench coats, we were completely monged. So you good for that one?
Yeah, sure. Let's go on to your next one.
So you may have noticed that the sample ended on it's just fucking like garage rock chord progression. Boom, 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 boom. I can't remember exactly how it was, but it was just rock and roll chords. And would you say that like a significant number of the riffs on this record are based on, you know, generally bluesy kind of rock ideas?
I mean, yeah, in the sense
like
that
a lot of them.
In the sense that, like, early extreme metal, it's like, this is the material we have to work with, is, like, the weirdest hard rock we can find. Yeah. So, and that's why you hear on a lot of, like, old Dark Throne records, you just have these very evil rock and roll riffs.
Yeah, and a lot of it's coming from, like, primitive punk. So these, this, in a lot of ways, this band reminds me of the most extreme garage punk. Not just the Stooges, who are, you know, still the most extreme band of all time, but stuff from much later, like the 90s or in the 80s. Like garage punk, noise rock, stuff that heavily emphasizes, as you say, timbre, and also rhythm and noise. And, you know, taking these, like, bluesy riffs that are chromatically fucked and bent. So, here is an entire track of that. This is, Een Offer van Blood. Yeah, so that's just a really fucked up blues scale.
Yeah, it is. I think that if you dig back into a lot of like primordial Black and Death stuff, you're going to find a ton of pentatonic stuff. It's just, it sounds so different because we're used to pentatonic riffs progressing in a certain manner, like in rock and roll bands, and then the metal bands just start like cutting up those scales and rearranging them in really weird ways, and that's how you kind of get primordial extreme metal ideas.
Yeah, like Stooges and Motorhead, the Ace of Spades riff, right? It's basically like chromatic blues, right? You really emphasize the fact that the tritone, which is normally a passing tone, becomes like the center of the whole thing along with the root, right? And you basically then take that as license to add random chromatics wherever you want.
And then you get into full-fledged like Slayer territory where it becomes entirely chromatic.
Or Hellhammer, right?
Yeah.
Hellhammer you can like hear, or on Crypt of Rays, right, by Celtic Frost, you can hear this weirdly rock and roll, almost Ramones-y chord progression, which I'm not even a huge it's like weird.
Oh yeah, no, into Crypt of Rays has that weird like descending chromatic figure on the chorus that's just like 4-3-2-1 or some shit.
It has queasy chromatics, but also like a perky major key blues progression. Like,
it's such a weird song.
That song succeeds only because of how broken it is.
I love that track. That's like one of my favorite Frost songs.
No, I had to get older and dumber to really appreciate it. It's but yeah. So speaking of dumb, like in terms of the, it's entirely possible these guys have never listened to like a punk record in their lives, and they're just getting here by reptile brain affinity, but like. There's a really clear parallel to stuff like The Birthday Party, which had this sort of like lurching, lower mid-tempo, broken chromatic blues grooves, similar kind of like ranting vocal delivery. Also Brain Bombs, right? Like Brain Bombs musically sounds weak in a way that this doesn't, like deliberately. It's supposed to be like wretchedly fumbling, but the whole spirit. You've listened to Brain Bombs, right?
I probably once in the long past. I'm familiar with the band, but
it's just like it's like sicko drunk party music. The lyrics are totally antisocial. It's like they have a song just about stabbing someone in the head, which sounds like physically difficult. Some just like extremely creepy, like rapey sex lyrics. Stuff that's like just legitimately totally antisocial and awful, right? And somehow they got a pass in the punk scene for a very long time. But I think that's because it was so obviously preposterous, right?
Yeah.
Brain Bombs it's gleefully antisocial, and it's a vibe. And this sort of lurches kind of like Brain Bombs, and the ranting vocals are kind of a lot like that, minus the thing that makes it part of the art punk scene, which is this deliberately stuttering, self-neutering vibe.
Yeah, no, this is just like just puking as hard as possible continuously.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Yeah, puking as hard. Speaking of which, the vocals.
Yeah,
they're really awesome.
They're fucking awful in like a cool way.
Yeah.
He's clearly just having fun, like just being as grotesque as possible. Like every syllable wavers in like a 3-octave range. Just kind of
the way that like the way that the reverb sort of like, I don't know what the technical word, it kind of like pans the vocals across the entire rehearsal space.
Oh, they're so fucking loud and in front. This is like sort of vocal-led music in a weird way.
The vocals are like coming from around you.
Yeah, it's very uncanny, very weird. So, okay, last sample, for which I came up with a new Terminus piece of terminology that I think we'll be using in the future. So, the last track, ist geen Licht an het einde van de tunnel. The whole... Hearing this track at the end kind of put the whole record together for me, because it feels like once you finally get here, everything's leading to this point of a like maximal just like chaos and degeneracy, for which I have branded the new term schizodrone, which I think is the only way I can describe whatever the fuck this thing is. If you tried to actually write this out musically in drum notation, it would just be a big note saying, just hit whatever symbol you want, like fucking whenever. Like, we don't care. Just whack them.
Yeah.
It's so awful. This is like peak awful feeling. Like, everything's so horrible. It doesn't even, like, in those dumb fucking like 2-chord riffs, it doesn't even feel like those single chords are stable. It feels like, I don't know, there's like something, the guitar tone is like sick, like it's like got the flu or something, like it can't even like hold a single power chord together. It's almost like it's on a fretless guitar and it's kind of wavering in and out of pitch constantly. The whole record sounds like it's wavering in and out of pitch nonstop. Everything just feels bad. There is no stable surface for this music to ever rest on. Even the most bulldozery, straightforward, like open note chug parts feel like they're barely functioning. And that is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, the same thing. Like, despite all that part totally rips. It's it's maybe the most rapid riffs per minute on the entire record. Like, there's like 5 different parts happen, like, one after another one. And it's just got that, like, really driving, rolling double bass thing. The blast riff there at the end is, you can tell, it could be arbitrary, but it's written to be as, like, grating and inane as possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly horrid. And the funny thing is that despite it all these songs have distinguishing characteristics. Like, we didn't even get to sample Zwarte Rook, which is where they just have, like, pure clangs on the guitars. Yeah, this is a horrible racket, isn't it? And so with that, I want to bring us out on some of that abrasive garage punk I was talking about. This is the first record my dad ever told me to turn off and never play in the house again.